I wanted to discuss wokeness a little bit today. It's been used quite a bit in a lot of arguments and a lot of memes and a lot of posts. You have people on the left saying things like, I'm proud to be woke, and anybody that uses it in a negative context doesn't know what it means. And you have a lot of other people using it negatively. So I kind of wanted to go over what I have researched in regards to woke and what I've noticed with both of these factions. Originally, woke was used as far back as the 1930s by the Black Civil Rights Movement. And back then, it was specific to their movement, and it was specific to generally policing and government. And when they used it to explain being aware of their surroundings and being aware that the police and the government were not on their side. And the tactics that they used in order to continue to oppress them and make sure that they were treated as less than human despite the Civil War being over. During that time, we had Jim Crow laws, and our Black citizens were indeed oppressed. They continued having all sorts of issues, having their basic rights all the way up through the 1960s. And so back then, that's what it was used for. It was used for recognizing that the police and the government do not have your best interests at heart, and being able to see through the manipulation tactics that they used in order to get away with the things that they got away with. So by 2010, things began to change. The right wing decided to take the word woke and start applying it to more of the radical identity politics that was coming out of the left. And they did this, and they did this without a fight. And unfortunately, language does change over time. People can take a word and morph it into something else. And the only time when that does not occur is when there's a huge backlash against that happening, the time that it's happening. For example, right now, we're dealing with a group of fringe activists that don't make up very much of the population at all, trying to change the word woman to include men. And that instantly began receiving backlash, and significant backlash. And therefore that word is not changed. And they're continuing to push and continuing to push, and they're getting a lot of pushback, far more pushback than there are of them. And so I don't think that word is going to change. However, when it came to the woke thing, there was no backlash. There was no fight. There was no mass movement coming forward to dispute the change of this word. And so because of that, the word was effectively changed over time. And this word that used to just mean for the Black community during the Civil Rights era, we have to be aware of the manipulation tactics of the government and the police. And we have to be able to see through those manipulations. It changed from that definition to the definition of we are using identity politics and pushing our idea of what identity politics are onto the public. And that's what it became. So currently, as much as you love to argue this, it currently means pushing identity politics into the realm of popular culture. That's what woke means. Woke now means, because there was no backlash at the time of the change, it no longer means a Black person's point of view when it comes to the government and seeing through the manipulation tactics of the police and the government. That's gone. That's been gone for decades. The current definition has to do with pushing your idea of identity politics into the popular culture. So, a lot of things going on that are called woke now are things like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Snow White is a fairy tale that specifically references a princess whose skin is as white as snow, which is why she was named Snow White. And she was replaced by a character who was not white, and therefore making the name completely irrelevant. And that's what people are pushing back about. They're pushing back about things that are very clear in the text. And because of identity politics and because of the push for inclusion, we're going to eliminate all that was before in favor of these identity politics. This is why these things are failing, because continuing to push things like this and change the way things are in reference to changing ideas and being more inclusive are going to backfire. There are plenty of literary characters who were written as Black, who were written as Hispanic, who were written as East Asian, who were written as South Asian. And by the way, it did happen. Go back and think about Ghost in the Machine. Scarlett Johansson was hired to play what is known as an Asian female character. There was severe backlash against that. Severe. Because why are you taking a white character when this character was written as Asian? That movie bombed because of that. You should have hired an Asian character, an Asian actor for an Asian character. That's how that works. The same thing happened with that movie, I believe it was called Aloha, with Emma Stone. She was hired, this white woman was hired to play a mixed race person, a real person. And there was severe backlash because this was a miscast situation in which there was a white person playing somebody who was not white. And that movie bombed. But wokeism allows for that same thing to happen as long as it's not a white person. There's no difference. There's no difference. How the character is written is how the character should be portrayed. Period. There was backlash against Cleopatra for the same reasons. You have to understand, when it comes to historical figures, real people, and beloved characters, when you stray from exactly how they're written as far as appearance because you want to be more inclusive, you're only alienating the audience. You're only pissing people off. And that's what wokeism is. There are plenty of written characters that do not specifically say her skin was white as snow that you can replace with somebody that doesn't have white skin. It happens all the time. There's consistently people of all different races playing different characters that don't have a specific race written within them and just certain features. So that anybody with those features, regardless of race, can play that character. That's how that works. That's when that works. When you push inclusion where it doesn't belong, including when you cast white people to play Asian people, it backfires. So when it comes to wokeism, a lot of this is based on forcing inclusion in places it doesn't belong. And when people talk about wokeism, now that the definition has changed, that's what they're talking about. They're not talking about 1930s to 1960s not being able to see through the manipulations. The people who claim, I'm proud to be woke, are literally saying, I'm proud to force inclusion where it's not wanted. I'm proud to be able to stand up and piss people off by changing everything that is unnecessary. You're not standing up and saying, I can see clearly. I can see through manipulations. In fact, you're not seeing through manipulations. You're doing the opposite. You're going along with the Democratic Party strategy of continuing to replace people and play identity politics in order to try to make a buck or try to look like the good guy, when in reality, it's only angering people. Why would you be proud of that? Why would you be proud of going along with the Democratic Party line that it doesn't matter what they do or what they are, as long as they're not white? As long as they're not white, we're cool. We're good. It doesn't matter if they're written as white. It doesn't matter if they're very specifically described as that. If the person who existed was white. Screw that. Nobody is allowed to be white. Welcome to wokeism. Another thing about wokeism is the idea that whatever the Democratic Party strategy is at the time is what is going to be pushed. So it doesn't matter what topic you're on. It could be racism, it could be sexism, it could be transgenderism. It doesn't really matter. What matters is this is the strategy of the Democratic Party, and they're doing it for money. They're doing it because companies like BlackRock have insisted that they do this. And hey, they got to get their donations so they can continue to have power. Where do they get those donations? BlackRock and all of the companies they own. So if you want to understand why things are the way they are, you really have to do two things. One, you have to look at the history, figure out how language changed, what it changed to, and why, whether there was a backlash, whether there wasn't, and then look at where this idea is coming from to begin with. And 9 times out of 10, you can just follow the money. So I'm really tired of seeing all of these people because it makes me think that they don't have a brain when they start talking about how they're proud to be woke. And it's like, why would you be proud of falling for a manipulation tactic? Why would that be proud? Why would that make you filled with pride that you did the opposite of the original meaning? You, instead of seeing through the manipulation and seeing what it is, you fell for the manipulation of the government and the corporations. And you're proud of that. I'm never going to understand it. Wokeism is a dying thing. It's very clear. It's not going to last very much longer. The people are fighting back against it just in general. And there's very few people left that still stand for it. I personally stand for 1930s to 1960s wokeism when it comes to Black people, the government, and the police. As it was from the 30s to the 60s. However, today's version of wokeism can go die in a fire.